If you had seen me that day walking into the party in a tailored suit, silent among the laughter, you might have thought I was just another guest, but I wasn't. I was the daughter no one had invited. At my father's 70th birthday, in front of over 100 people, he raised a glass and said, "You're not my biological child, so I forgot to put your name in the will." The room erupted in laughter. Except for me. I walked up to the table, quiet, calm. I placed my gift, just a single sheet of paper, and ripped it in half. Then again, and again. He laughed until he realized what it was. When he finally pieced the paper back together, his face turned white. That's when he understood. The child he had erased was the one who built everything he ever wanted. And that gift? He would regret losing it forever. I grew up believing I was chosen. That's what my mom Evelyn always told me. "You didn't grow in my belly, Emma," she'd say, brushing my hair back before bedtime, "but you grew in my heart." As a child, I held on to those words like a secret badge of honor. My dad, Richard Carter, was a respected banker in Sacramento, stoic, stern, but I used to catch him smiling at me when I brought home straight A's. We weren't rich, but I had a pink bike with a ribbon basket, a bunk bed with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and Sunday pancakes that smelled like cinnamon and love. Back then, I truly believed I belonged. But that feeling didn't last. When I was 8, everything shifted. Evelyn got pregnant. I remember sitting on the hospital bench, clutching a stuffed giraffe they gave me as a big sister gift, waiting to meet the new baby. But when Nathan was born, the center of the world shifted and I fell out of orbit. Suddenly, everything was about him. His cries, his feedings, his milestones. I told myself it was normal. He was a baby, after all. But the distance kept growing. At school pickup, I'd run to the car, waving a painting I'd made. "Look, Mom." She'd glance at it quickly, then turn back to Nathan in his car seat, cooing at his gurgles. One evening, I heard my dad mutter under his breath as I spilled juice at dinner. "This one's not even blood," he said, wiping the table roughly. He didn't know I heard it. But I did, and it never left me. After that, the warmth started to fade. The bedtime stories stopped. My awards were tucked into drawers, while Nathan's finger paintings got framed. I became the helper, the babysitter, the invisible big sister who didn't need attention. Still, I tried. I cooked. I cleaned. I stayed up late making birthday cards with glitter glue. But no matter what I did, it felt like I was chasing a kind of love that kept stepping just out of reach. And eventually, I stopped chasing. By the time I turned 15, I understood. Being adopted didn't make me special, it made me optional. That realization settled deep in my bones, quiet but cold, like I was a guest in a house I once called home. But I didn't rebel. I didn't act out. I planned. I studied. I saved. I told myself, I will make a life so good, they'll regret forgetting me. And someday, they'll see. I moved out the day I turned 18. No party, no cake, no "we'll miss you." Just a silent breakfast, cold toast on a chipped plate, and the sound of my dad rustling his newspaper. I had packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags: clothes, textbooks, and a hand-drawn floor plan of my dream house. I'd sketched it late at night for years, each detail a quiet promise. One day, I'll build something of my own. When I stood at the door that morning, Evelyn said, "Good luck out there." Richard didn't even look up from his paper. Nathan, now 9, was playing video games in the living room. He barely noticed I was leaving. That was the day I realized I was no longer angry. I was free. I boarded a Greyhound bus to San Diego with 412 in my wallet and a scholarship acceptance letter in my backpack. I didn't know anyone there, but I knew what I wanted: a degree in sustainable architecture. The first year was brutal. I worked the front desk of a 24-hour gym at night, tutored high school math on weekends, and survived on instant noodles and coffee shop leftovers. I slept in a garage apartment with no heating, a thin mattress on the floor, and duct tape over a crack in the window. But I was alive, on my own terms. Every time I felt like quitting, I'd picture my father's face blank, unreadable, and remember his words: "She's not really mine." That sentence became fuel. I buried myself in textbooks and CAD software, pouring every ounce of pain into floor plans and structural blueprints. I wanted to design buildings that lasted, structures people wouldn't abandon when something newer came along. Unlike me, by junior year, professors started noticing me. One offered me a paid internship at an eco-design firm. I said yes without blinking. It meant longer hours and more responsibility, but I didn't care. I wasn't just building a career, I was building an identity. I stopped calling home, stopped sending updates. They never reached out, either. At graduation, I didn't invite them. I walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, and accepted my degree with a full heart and an empty seat in the front row where they might have been. But I didn't look back. I had already learned that sometimes silence is the loudest goodbye. After graduation, I stayed in San Diego. The city had become more than just my escape, it was home. The salty air, the bold sunsets, the modern angles of downtown architecture, they made me feel like I belonged to something finally mine. I joined a local green construction firm that specialized in sustainable housing. My title was modest, junior design engineer. But I showed up early, left late, and volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted: public housing renovations, budget-limited school repairs, eco-retrofitting old apartment blocks. Within a year, I was leading my first project, a tiny solar-powered duplex on the edge of Chula Vista. It wasn't glamorous, but it stood because of me. My name was on the permit. My fingerprints were in every brick. That duplex gave me something no parent ever had: proof I mattered. But I wanted more. I spent nights sketching ideas at my tiny kitchen table, dreaming of a firm that didn't just build but healed. Structures that responded to the climate, that gave back to the land, that felt like shelter for both body and soul. So I started Verdi Built Me Own Company with just 3, 0, and a website I coded myself. The first months were slow. No clients, just emails ignored and calls unreturned. I lived off savings, canned soup, and pure grit. Then a woman named Trina Delgado called. She was a single mom who'd inherited a rundown lot and wanted to build a home that could stand up to droughts. Everyone else quoted her prices she couldn't afford. I offered her a plan designed from reclaimed materials, passive cooling, and low-cost solar. She said yes. We built her home in 6 months. It was small, but beautiful, sunlit, and resilient, like her. When the local paper ran a story on it, sustainable sanctuary for a single mom, calls started pouring in. By year 3, Vertibuilt had a 6-person team. I moved into a modest office near Balboa Park. We had contracts with nonprofits, eco-minded developers, and even the city council. But no matter how high we climbed, I kept one rule: never build for ego, always build for belonging. My phone buzzed one day with a message from a classmate I hadn't heard from in years. Your dad was on the news. Bank retirement. Big party coming up. Just thought you'd want to know. I stared at the message for a long time. I hadn't spoken to Richard or Evelyn in over a decade. But I knew their house still had the same white fence. And I wondered if I knocked on their door now, would they even recognize me? The message about my dad's retirement party didn't leave my mind. At first I tried to ignore it. I deleted the text, buried myself in work, told myself I didn't care. But, late at night, while reviewing blueprints in my apartment, a thought crept in like a whisper. What if you showed up not to be accepted, but to prove you no longer needed to be? It wasn't about revenge, it was about release. That's when the idea came to me. Not a grand speech, not a confrontation, but a gift, something symbolic, something he would never expect. I remembered a conversation years ago, back when I was 10. My dad was watering the yard, and I was sitting on the porch after getting picked last for kickball. I don't need friends, I muttered. Richard looked up and said, You know what matters, Emma? Owning land. That's what makes people respect you. He probably forgot that moment. I didn't. So I found a plot of land. A beautiful piece, right by Lake Tahoe, tucked among redwoods, and with a view of the mountains. It wasn't flashy, but it was pristine, quiet, and untouched. It cost $3.2 million. I didn't blink. It wasn't just a gift. It was a statement. I can give you everything you value, even if you gave me nothing. I worked with my lawyer to draw up the deed, transferred the property to my father's name. No strings attached, no press, no credit, just a gift. Part of me hoped he'd see it for what it was. Not a bribe, not a performance, but a final act of closure. I planned to hand it to him on his birthday. Of course I wasn't invited. I heard through a former neighbor that it would be a grand event, retirement and 70th birthday combined. Garden party, catered, live music, speeches, over 100 guests. They'd probably toast to Nathan's new job at the bank. Evelyn would beam in a pale green dress. Richard would shake hands like a king. And me? I would arrive unannounced, calm, dignified. Not to ask for forgiveness, not to be recognized, but to offer a gift that would speak louder than any apology they never gave. A single envelope, a silent gesture. And if they couldn't see its meaning, then maybe, just maybe, they didn't deserve it in the first place. The day of the party, I woke early. I ironed my favorite Navy suit, the one I wore to our first city contract signing. It wasn't glamorous, but it made me feel grounded, professional, present, untouchable. I tucked the envelope-eth deed to the Lake Tahoe property into a leather folder, sealed and smooth. On the front, I had embossed his name in gold, Richard Carter. The drive from San Diego to Sacramento took over 8 hours. I didn't play music. I let silence fill the car like a second passenger, steadying me. I rehearsed what I might say. Happy birthday, Dad. I wanted to give you something meaningful. No hard feelings, just closure. This is from me, your daughter Evan, if you don't call me that. But mostly, I imagined his face. Not shocked, not tearful, just still, maybe even proud. I arrived at dusk. Their house hadn't changed. The white fence still stood. The daisy bushes my mother used to trim were in full bloom. The sound of chatter and string lights humming gave everything a surreal glow. I stood by the gate for a moment, gathering my breath. Then, I walked in. No one noticed at first. Everyone was laughing, mingling, sipping champagne from tall glasses. A jazz trio played beneath the pergola. Tables were arranged in perfect symmetry across the backyard. Then someone turned and froze. It was Nathan. He was taller than I remembered, wearing an expensive blazer and holding a drink. His smirk was immediate. "Well, well," he said, loud enough to draw attention. "If it isn't the long-lost charity case." People nearby chuckled awkwardly. "Did you take a wrong turn, Emma?" he asked. "Or just here to make a scene?" I smiled tightly. "I came to drop off a gift." "A gift?" He squinted. "Let me guess. One of those DIY flower pots from Pinterest?" Laughter rippled around him. I didn't respond. I turned and kept walking toward the head table. That's when I saw my father. He was giving a toast, holding a glass of red wine, his silver hair catching the last light of day. Evelyn stood beside him, wearing that soft green dress just like I'd imagined. He saw me mid-sentence, his voice caught, his eyes narrowed, and then he smiled, a smile full of rehearsed charm, not recognition. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the mic, "before we wrap up, I have one more thing to share." I stopped walking. Something in his tone froze the air. "I want to officially announce the terms of my estate," he said. The crowd leaned in. He looked directly at me. "To my son, Nathan, I leave everything. The house, the accounts, the land. As for Emma, well, she's not my biological child. So, I forgot to put her name in the will." The laughter exploded. For a moment, I didn't move. The air was thick with laughter. Champagne glasses clinked. Even Evelyn chuckled politely, her eyes avoiding mine. I stood there, folder in hand, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than an awkward interruption. The microphone squealed as Richard handed it back to the band leader and turned away, already moving on as if his announcement was just another joke. Except it wasn't a joke to me. It was the final nail in a lifelong silence. I walked forward steady, controlled. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even blink. When I reached the head table, I placed the leather folder down, gently, deliberately, right in front of the birthday cake. People nearby stopped talking. Nathan cocked his head, amused. "You brought a gift after all?" he smirked. "That's cute." I didn't answer. I opened the folder, took out the single sheet of paper, and held it up. The gold-embossed title read, "Grant of Property Transfer, Parcel, LTA 54,721, Lake Tahoe County." The room quieted, as if sensing something shift. "I bought this for you," I said, loud enough to be heard. $3.2 million. Lakeside property. Off-grid potential. It could have been your dream home." Richard turned to me, eyes narrowing. "It's yours," I added. "Or it was." I paused. Then I ripped the paper in half. Gasps broke out around the yard. I ripped it again. Then again. Until the deed was a handful of fluttering scraps, falling like dry snow over the tablecloth and the cake. The crowd stood frozen. No one laughed now. Nathan looked stunned for the first time that night. Evelyn's face paled, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for a glass of wine. "Richard?" He said nothing. Not a word. He just stared at the torn paper, lips slightly parted, hands clenched at his sides. For once, his face showed something real, not smugness, not charm, but confusion. Or maybe something close to fear. I looked him in the eye. I didn't come here to beg, I said, my voice calm but firm. I came to show you what I've built in my own, without you. I turned and walked away. No applause, no confrontation. Just the hush of disbelief behind me, and the weight of my own heartbeat thudding in my chest. As I crossed the yard, a guest whispered, "Did she say 3 million?" Another murmured, "Why would they do that to her?" And that was all I needed. I didn't need Richard's recognition. I didn't need Evelyn's excuses. I didn't even need Nathan's jealousy. I just needed to know that for the first time in that house, I had been seen. I reached the gate, stepped through, and didn't look back. The music resumed behind me, half-hearted and out of rhythm, and somewhere beneath the birthday cake, buried in frosting and candle wax, lay the remains of a gift he would never understand until it was far too late. I thought that would be the end. I drove back to San Diego in silence, parked my car, walked into my apartment, and sat down at my desk without taking off my shoes. The city lights blinked through the window. Everything felt still. But the stillness didn't last. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. An hour after that, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me. My name's Erica. I was at your father's party. I think you should hear what happened after you left." I hesitated, then called. Erica was a junior partner at my dad's bank. She'd only met me once, when I was a child. She told me that after I walked out, no one spoke for several minutes. "They all just stood there," she said, "like you'd pulled the floor out from under them." Then she said something I didn't expect. "Your daddy picked up the pieces." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he got on his knees, Emma, in front of everyone. He bent down and picked up the scraps of paper, one by one, like he could somehow undo it." I couldn't breathe. Erica continued. "People were watching. No one said anything at first. Then someone, Mr. Klein, his old friend from the board, he walked up and said, 'You're a fool, Richard. That woman you humiliated. She built something you couldn't even dream of.'" I closed my eyes. "She's worth more than everything in your will." That's what he said. Erica told me the party ended early. Some people left in disgust. Others approached Evelyn, but she just kept repeating, "We didn't know. We didn't know." "And Nathan?" He tried to joke it off, apparently. "Drama queen," he called me. "She probably forged it." But no one laughed with him. Later that night, I got another message, this time from Aunt Carol, my father's sister. She hadn't spoken to me since I was 15. Her text simply said, "He's been in his study for hours. The torn deed is on his desk. He won't speak to anyone." I didn't reply, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept wondering, did he regret it? Did he finally see Menno, the adopted child, not the outsider but the daughter who had built her own name from rubble? I wanted to say I didn't care, that I was over it. But part of Metha girl, who once waited for him to say, "I'm proud of you," still listened for an apology that would never come. A week passed. Then two. Then a letter arrived. Real paper, handwritten, no return address. "Emma, I don't know how to begin this. I suppose that's fitting since I never really knew how to begin anything with you. I've reread this page 100 times and still don't know what to say, except that I failed you. I failed to protect the bond we had when you were little. I failed to see what you were becoming. And in that moment on my birthday, I failed as a father in front of everyone. I picked up the pieces of what you gave me, not just the paper, the truth. I don't know how to make this right, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Richard. No, Dad. Just Richard. It should have made it easier. It didn't. I held the letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. Instead, I went to my closet, pulled out the old manila folder where I kept my early sketches, and slid the letter inside, right behind the floor plan of that dream home I designed as a girl, because that's where it belonged with the versions of me that had waited, that had hoped. Now, I wasn't waiting anymore. The next day, I called my project manager and asked him to draw up plans for a new build a community center, fully solar, with workspaces, gardens, and a mentoring hall. Where? He asked. I thought for a moment, then smiled. Lake Tahoe, I said. He paused. That's where the land was, right? No, I replied. That's where my land is now. The community center opened a year later. We called it the Haven. Built on a slope above Lake Tahoe, it had wide glass walls, open-air classrooms, solar roofs, and a garden that bloomed year-round. But more than that, it had teenagers who'd aged out of foster care, single mothers looking for a second chance, young girls with nowhere else to go. Every week, I showed up sometimes to teach, sometimes just to listen. I watched as kids painted murals on the walls, as mentors held workshops under the cedar trees, as broken voices grew stronger. One afternoon, a girl named Layla came up to me. She was 16, with tough eyes and a soft voice. You really built this? She asked. I nodded. Even without a family? I smiled. Especially without a family. She stared at me a moment longer, then hugged me without a word. That was the moment I realized. I didn't need Richard to call me his daughter. I didn't need Evelyn's tears or Nathan's jealousy. I had created something that mattered, something that lasted, and that not revenge, not wealth was my legacy. The letter Richard wrote stayed locked away. I never wrote back. I never visited. But sometimes, when the mountain wind blows across the Haven, I imagine him standing there, watching from a distance, wondering what could have been. And I hope he knows. I gave him the chance to see me. He just wasn't strong enough to look.